have any slides, but I do have a warning. I am preaching to the converted here, but I want to remind you that Cassandra warned. Nobody listened. Facing the triple climate, we have a triple crisis of climate change, land degradation, and biodiversity loss. In Greek mythology, Cassandra was fated to foretell future events correctly, but never to be believed. Among other things, she predicted the fall of Troy, but her warnings went unheeded. For a while now, scientists across the globe have been warning about a significant and interconnected crisis involving climate change, land degradation, and biodiversity loss. There is unanimity of opinion that global temperatures are rising due to greenhouse gas emissions from human activities like burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes. That the polar ice caps and the glaciers are melting, leading to rising sea levels between 3 to 7 feet by 2050, and that ecosystems are under siege. It is now commonplace to see extreme weather events on the news. Super hurricanes, heat domes, heat waves, wildfires, droughts, rain bombs, and crazy flooding. But there's a paradox. While on the one hand, there is no denying that natural disasters are becoming more frequent and intense, on the other hand, when scientists warn about climate change, their warnings are being downplayed or ignored. Widespread failure to acknowledge the seriousness and urgency of the situation has turned our scientists and environmentalists into modern-day Cassandras. Worse, the triple whammy crisis remains a low priority for politicians. In the event, rising sea levels will have a catastrophic impact on Port of Spain and our low-lying coastal areas. Consider, for example, how the waterfront complex, Movie Town, and West Moorings will be affected if the sea rises between 3 to 7 feet over the next 25 years. A couple inches of rainfall and Port of Spain floods. Consider coral islands in the Caribbean, such as the Bahamas, Cayman Islands, and Anguilla, and how they will struggle to keep up with rising sea levels. Consider the prediction that in the next 25 years, climate change will reshape the world. Some nations will cease to exist, and cities like New York, London, Miami, Jakarta, Lagos, Delhi, and Georgetown will be at risk of repeated flooding and impacted infrastructure, costing billions in damages. Indeed, predictions for the future are dire. Loss of fertile land and soil degradation will reduce agricultural productivity, exacerbating global hunger and malnutrition. Water scarcity will worsen as deserts expand because of drought, as aquifers are depleted, and as rainfall patterns become unpredictable. The extinction of key species, such as pollinators, will disrupt ecosystems, threatening the survival of humanity and the natural world. Coral reefs, rainforests, wetlands, critical for biodiversity, may collapse, reducing global resilience to climate change. This reads like bad science fiction, but it's for real. The world is going to become a very difficult place to live in. Climate change, land degradation, and rising sea levels will displace millions. Climate refugees will strain resources in host countries, increasing social and political tensions. Scarcity of water, arable land, and flood will lead to conflicts social and political tensions. Global security risks will increase as nations compete for dwindling resources. The Earth is reaching an ecological tipping point, and which, if crossed, may lead to runaway climate change, making mitigation efforts futile. Our eyes are open, but we are sleeping. Wake up, wake up. That's my message today. It's time to wake up to the realities of climate change. We need to make major shifts and to correct our course. If we dither, by the time we wake up to the danger, it may be too late. But it's not all doom and gloom. I believe Trinidad and Tobago is better off than many other places. We are blessed with a bountiful country. I believe that if we act decisively now, there is hope. The window is narrow, but it's open. While the challenges are immense, solutions already exist, but it requires bold leadership, systemic change, and collective effort. All hands on deck. Government, municipal corporations, NGOs, private sector, academia, civil society. All hands must collaborate in designing, planning, implementing, and financing sustainable practices. Practices that balance competing land use demands and the allocation of resources across multiple uses and sectors. We need a national policy and governance framework. In particular, we must update the current land use plan, which is 60 years old. 60 years old is our land use plan, in favor of one that aligns climate, agricultural, and conservation goals. The current land use plan was written for a very different world. Unsustainable practices can, if left unchecked, wreak havoc. 10 minutes is insufficient time to expand as fully as I would like, but please allow me to recommend some initiatives that can pave the way towards a sustainable future. Nature-based solutions like the Northern Range Project, propagating and protecting our mangroves and wetlands, creating artificial reefs, and designating marine protected areas are a good start. We must halt deforestation, illegal quarrying, and squatting in sensitive areas. Instead, let's promote biodiversity conservation and ecosystem restoration by planting trees, restoring natural habitats, protecting wetlands, forests, and coral reefs. Sustainable land management and biodiversity conservation should be a national priority. The government's focus should not only be on GDP, but also on biodiversity net gain. In fact, senior economists and researchers are predicting that climate-friendly green policy initiatives may offer the best economic return for government spending. We must encourage regenerative agriculture, sustainable farming, and fishing practices to preserve ecosystems and biodiversity. We must better manage sedimentation and promote soil health restoration. When I see the Gulf of Paria turn brown every time it rains hard, I despair. I despair that as a society, we seem to lack an appreciation that soil, like water, is indispensable to life. Soil is a precious resource needed to produce food, to filter and purify our water, and to regulate the atmosphere. Soil plays a crucial role in driving the carbon and nitrogen cycles. It is also key to tackling climate change, as it captures and stores vast amounts of carbon. When we ignore the damage caused to soil via pollution, unlined landfills, or the use of toxic chemicals, whether it's fertilizers or pesticides, we facilitate the loss of soil structure, nutrient degradation, and soil salinity. Healthy soil is a dynamic, living ecosystem, a complex combination of minerals and organic matter containing air, water, life. The gift of soil is a national treasure that ought not to be overlooked or wasted. Let us reduce overconsumption and waste by promoting reuse, recycling, composting, and the circular economy. It's time we transition to renewable energy. Citizens should be encouraged to generate solar and other forms of renewable energy by providing incentives and making amendments to the TNTEC Act. I would love to see the establishment of a rapid rail mass transit system between Sangre Grande and Chaguaramas, San Juan to Point Fortin, powered by green, renewable energy. One of the consequences of climate change is increased flooding. Evidence shows that inequality often compels the disadvantaged to live in areas that are more prone to flooding, thus increasing their exposure to episodes of repeated flooding and suffering. We may have to consider the relocation of families and communities living in flood-prone and coastal areas where the land is likely to be lost to the sea. We need to enhance climate resilience and adaptation, among other things, by embracing the Sendai framework as part of national policy, focusing on measures which address the 3 dimensions of disaster risk: exposure to hazards, vulnerability, and capacity, to prevent the creation of new risk, reduce existing risk, and increase resilience. But this means investing in public infrastructure that can withstand extreme weather events. It means educating our communities on disaster preparedness and climate-resilient agricultural practices, strengthening disaster risk governance, and adopting a forward-looking and action-oriented framework for disaster risk reduction using the Build Back Better principle. I keep hearing all the talk and the plans, and talk don't cook rice. We need to update our environmental laws and processes, including removal of unnecessary obstacles to direct party actions under the Environmental Management Act. And we should boost funding and investments to maintain biodiversity, avoid land degradation, and opportunities for ecosystem restoration by unlocking the Green Fund as was originally intended. Long story short, our future is bound to the health of our environment. We need to shape an economy and a society that is greener, cleaner, and sustainable. If we hope to mitigate the converging land, climate, biodiversity crisis, we must address land degradation. We must rethink our relationship with nature. And this will require a combination of strategic planning, stakeholder engagement, financial mechanisms, and monitoring frameworks. It means embedding land restoration and biodiversity conservation into broader national priorities. As the saying goes, plant a tree, plant a future. For a better tomorrow, plant a tree today. But we must act now. By the time the problem begins to manifest in earnest, it will be too late to solve. The actions we take over the next decade, or the lack thereof, will determine the trajectory of this country's future. Let us not repeat the mistake of those who failed to listen to Cassandra. Instead, let's heed the warnings while there is still time to act. Thank you.